The latest Guild Wars 2 expansion, Janthir Wilds, is landing next week, so today we are taking a look at every single new feature we are going to get our grubby little hands on. Janthir Wilds is launching next week, and we're going to have a ton of new features and areas of the world to explore. We'll be heading up north to the Isles of Janthir with 2 new maps on launch, the Lowland Shore and Janthir Sintry, and a brand new faction to interact with, the Lowland Coden. Once again, we are branching out in terms of the story after we finish the Elder Dragon saga with the End of Dragons expansion. And as a huge enjoyer of Living World Season 3, which had a load of tie-ins to the Isles of Janthir and the Masat, I am massively excited for. It's been a full year since the launch of Secrets of the Obscure, and ArenaNet are doubling down on their model of releasing a new expansion every single year, with a major patch coming every 3 months after that. So with a year of content under our belt, it's time to see how ArenaNet can improve on and iterate on the model that they introduced with Secrets of the Obscure, and bring us an absolute banger of an expansion. So let's dive in and see what we have to look forward to. First up, after 5 long years, raids have finally returned. Raids have always been my favorite content in Guild Wars 2, so I'm absolutely stoked for them to be making a comeback. It also looks like we are getting additional difficulty modes, with the new raid being implemented into the story, a regular 10-person mode that we're used to, and challenge modes being released at some point after the raid launches, as well as a 50-person convergence version of it as well. Short segue, this convergence will also drop essences which you can use for legendary obsidian armor that came out with Secrets of the Obscure, as well as the new legendary spear and backpack. So another source of progress towards legendary gear is a very nice reward. Outside of challenge modes on the later raid wings, the lack of difficulty modes has been, in my opinion, one of the biggest things holding them back. There is a huge jump in difficulty between the personal story and open world content in Guild Wars 2 and raids. A lot of newer and even more experienced players are hesitant to jump into raids because they don't want to make mistakes and let down their team, especially given that the raids in Guild Wars 2 have been out for so long and more experienced raiders have them basically on farm now. So anything that gives new players a taste of the raiding experience and allows them to experience the story is a great thing. I also like that they're doubling up and giving us a convergence version of the raid as well for 50 people. One of the biggest issues with raids is that they took a lot of developer time to create, and only a small group of players actually engage with them. So it becomes really hard to justify them from a business perspective. With the release of Strike Missions, we saw a lot of story encounters being repurposed into 10-person content, which overall is a much more efficient way to pump out content, and is why we've had a more consistent release of Strike Missions compared to raids in recent years. I personally much prefer raids to Strike Missions. I like the deeper story you get from a dedicated instance with multiple bosses. It's more efficient, honestly, rolling from boss to boss instead of jumping between different instances, and I just plain enjoy the encounter design more in raids. I'm keen as anything for Raid Wing 8 to come out in November, and will absolutely be blasting through it on release. With Janthir Wilds, we are also getting a renewed focus on the Warclaw mount. Now, the Warclaw was released back in 2019, and you get it exclusively through World vs. World, and it's the only mount that you can use in that game mode. You get a whole lot of skills that are specifically useful in World vs. World, and it shook up the entire game mode. You can also use the Warclaw in PvE, but compared to every other mount you have, it's basically useless. It's more or less a worse raptor in every single way. With the X-Pack coming out, we are getting a major rework of the Warclaw when it comes to PvE, which is fantastic. It feels really jarring, honestly, to have all these amazing, varied mounts to play with, and then you have this evolutionary throwback just sitting there taking up a keybind. First up, all the World vs. World skills that Warclaw has access to have been brought to PvE and been reworked to make them more useful. Chain Pull will deal some damage and pull enemies closer to you, will be very nice for grouping up mobs in PvE. Battle Maul will make Warclaw leap forward and do an AoE attack which stuns enemies, basically a tweaked version of the Raptor Engage skill with a stun instead of an AoE pull. Sniff will buff nearby allies and detect nearby enemies, and with a mastery it will also detect nearby treasure, which your Warclaw can dig up. I'm super curious just how much this lets you farm in terms of gold and materials. Lance will let you throw a spear, deal damage, and knock down your enemy, so we're going to have a lot of CC tied to your Warclaw skills. We are also getting a new mastery line to juice up our Warclaw even more. 9 Lives will let you take no fall damage when you're riding your Warclaw. A few mounts work like this, the Griffin, Skyscale, Skimmer, and the Jackal if you dodge just before you fall, but overall this is a very nice feature. Feline Reflexes will extend your jump by hitting the space crossbar while in midair. This is a huge point of difference for the Warclaw now, as you basically have access to a double jump. We actually got a sneak peek of this in a recent ArenaNet livestream, and it looks like you can get some serious height. So this will give the Warclaw a very nice niche when moving around in open world. Wildclaws will attack enemies when you dodge through them, and if you hit a target, you'll get some extra endurance back at the end of your dodge. I love this because one of the most annoying things when you're on your mount is getting knocked off as you pass near enemies. So being able to dodge more regularly through enemies will make it much easier to stay mounted overall, which is a great thing when waddling around in open world. Again, a nice point of difference. Feral Fury will increase the damage you do when mounted on your Warclaw, and the Lance skill will now stun enemies and do increase Defiance bar damage. Extra CC and damage is universally a good thing. Well Roasted caps things off and has huge implications for the other mounts. Simply, it will increase the endurance regen rate for all of your mounts. This means you can flap your wings more often on your Skyscale, dodge more on the Jackal, leap more often on your Raptor, and boost more frequently on your Roller Beetle. We'll have to wait and see just how much this increases the endurance regen rate, but this is a massive buff to effectively every mount, which has the potential to be insane. The Warclaw skills in World vs. World are also getting some tweaks and buffs. Chain Pull will now get the new effect Weaken Frame, which increases the damage inflicted to walls and gates. Sniff will also highlight damaged gates and walls. Lance will also be increased to 2 charges. Overall, Warclaw is getting a huge buff in PvE, and I am very excited to see just how much better the mount system is going to be overall because of it. Another exciting addition in terms of long-term goals in Guild Wars 2 is that we are getting a new legendary spear and backpack tied to open world. More legendaries are always a good thing in my opinion, and I'm very glad to see that when it comes to the backpack, it's going to be obtainable in the open world. Currently, there are 3 legendary backpacks, which you can either get from World vs. World, PvP, and Fractals of the Mist. Personally, I have both the PvP and the Fractal backpacks, but if you don't enjoy any of these game modes, then you're out of luck. Eventually, I would love to see a full set of legendary trinkets being obtainable from any of the main game modes, rather than having some only obtainable in specific game modes. This is a step towards that, so I am a happy camper. These won't be coming with the launch of Janthir Wilds, but ArenaNet have said that we can expect the legendary spear in the first major update after the expansion launches, so sometime in November potentially. No word yet on what the new legendary spear and backpack will look like, but personally, I don't have a legendary spear bound to either of my accounts, so I'll be crafting a few of these once they land. One of the biggest new features that I know everyone is frothing over, and one I never expected to see, is homesteading. Basically, player housing. We are getting a huge upgrade to the existing home instances, where we have a very cozy Skyrim-esque homestead which we can decorate. We'll have all your harvesting nodes you'd see in your regular home instance, and is a nice hub just to generally show off your account. In a recent PC Gamer video and ArenaNet livestream, we've gotten a good preview of the decorating system, and honestly, we have an insane level of control. You can basically place objects wherever you want, rotate them, resize them, even place them underground. We are also getting a new crafting system specifically to create decorations for your homestead. Now, this is separate from the normal crafting system in Guild Wars 2, like weaponsmithing and leatherworking, and is instead tied to a mastery line. This is great because instead of something like cooking being tied to an individual character, having decoration crafting tied to a mastery line means that every single character you have will be able to craft decorations. I'm very curious to see what the introduction of decoration crafting does to the in-game economy as well. This opens up the option for ArenaNet to introduce massive sinks for lesser used items, which might increase their value significantly. For players in general, this is a great thing. It means random things that otherwise wouldn't even be worth the mental effort to think about may now actually be worth something. Overall, this just makes the game more rewarding to play from a goal perspective, which is an amazing thing for everyone. Another nice tidbit is that the PvP game mode is getting some love. ArenaNet have announced they are working on a brand new PvP game mode. PvP is definitely the area of the game that has received the least attention in recent years, with the last game mode released being Stronghold, which came out all the way back in the Heart of Thorns expansion. As of now, we have no details as to what this will look like, but ArenaNet have said we can expect beta test later this year. More love for PvP is always a good thing. Just like how in Secrets of the Obscure, where each class got a new weapon, the spear, which up until now you could only use underwater, is coming to every class on land. Now personally, I prefer each class getting a unique weapon like we did in Secrets of the Obscure. That to me feels more exciting, but from the previews and the recent spear beta, it is going to feel very unique on every class. Out of all the underwater weapons, spear is the one that makes the most sense to bring on land as well. Trident conceptually is very similar to staff, and harpoon gun is basically just a soggy rifle. As a build guide enjoyer, I am going to have stuff to tinker with for the foreseeable future. So at the end of the day, I am a happy camper. Let me know down in the comments below which class you are most excited to see Spear on. Now, the ability for each class to use spears will be unlocked with the first mastery in the Coden mastery line, so we should get it pretty quickly once the X-Pack drops. It's a very similar situation overall to Secrets of the Obscure with the Weapon Master unlock, which is nice. From an efficiency and development perspective, I do like what they're doing here. We have a huge inventory of spear skins to choose from already, so some really nice repurposing of content. The design of the spear skills is super unique for each class, and while it's not the same as getting a new elite specialization and everything that comes along with it, the idea of introducing new weapons to each class looks to be much more sustainable from a development perspective, which Arena is going to need to keep up with an expansion every single year. Plus, each class already has 3 elite specializations to choose from, not to mention the core class itself. So there is the option for each new weapon they introduce to interact with each specialization differently, which can open up a ton of different builds. I'm looking forward to bringing you all a ton of new build guides and seeing which classes are juiced to the gills when Spear comes out. So stay tuned. And that's it, everyone. Every new feature we can expect when Janthir Wilds launches next week. I'm incredibly excited to get my hands on this, and I'll be streaming everything right on launch over on my Twitch channel. If you're interested, I've also created a second YouTube channel where you can expect to see a lot more tech content, streaming tips, and much more of my live Guild Wars 2 content. I've included a link down in the description below, so check out my second channel if you're interested. And with that, I'll catch you all next time. Cheers.